The sun was barely peeking through the trees when Tom started his hike that morning. The autumn air felt crisp against his face as he pulled his worn backpack higher on his shoulders. Tom loved these quiet Saturday mornings in the woods. No cell phone ringing, no emails to answer, just him and the peaceful Vermont forest he'd grown to love since moving there 3 years ago. "This is the life," he whispered to himself, his breath making little clouds in the cool morning air. He'd been following his usual trail for about an hour when something caught his attention, a barely noticeable deer path leading deeper into the woods. "Never seen that before," Tom muttered, squinting at the narrow opening between the trees. His friends always joked about his curiosity getting him into trouble, but today that same curiosity made him step off his familiar route. The leaves crunched under his hiking boots as he pushed forward, ducking under low-hanging branches and stepping over fallen logs. The forest grew denser here, the trees older and taller. Tom felt like he'd stepped into a different world altogether. Birds called to each other overhead, and somewhere nearby, a stream bubbled over rocks. He'd just stopped to take a drink from his water bottle when he heard it, a soft whimpering sound coming from somewhere to his right. At first, he thought it might be a bird, or maybe even the wind playing tricks on him. But there it was again, definitely the sound of an animal in distress. Tom set his backpack down and moved carefully toward the noise, trying not to make any sudden movements. "Hello," he called softly, feeling a bit foolish talking to the empty woods. The whimpering stopped for a moment, then started again, more urgent this time. Tom pushed through a thick patch of bushes, thorns catching on his jacket sleeves. The whimpering grew louder. Finally, he pushed aside a curtain of branches and found himself looking at a small clearing. Tom sat on the ground a few feet away from the injured animal, carefully avoiding any sudden movements. He'd been there for almost 30 minutes, slowly inching closer while offering small bits of his trail mix and jerky. "I bet you've had a rough few days out here," Tom said quietly, more to fill the silence than anything else. The animal's eyes never left him, but the trembling had stopped. That felt like progress. The forest had grown quiet around them, as if the trees themselves were watching this unlikely friendship unfold. A chickadee landed on a branch above Tom's head, curious about the scene below. "Look, I know you don't understand me," Tom continued, "but I can't just leave you here. Whatever happened to you, you need help." He still had about half his water left in his bottle. Slowly, he poured some into the palm of his hand and held it out. The animal watched, then stretched its neck forward to lap at the water. Tom smiled. Another small victory. "That's it. Good job, buddy." After the animal finished drinking, Tom decided it was time to try something bolder. He carefully removed his jacket, moving slowly so as not to startle his new friend, and laid it on the ground beside him. "This might help you feel better," he explained, knowing full well the animal couldn't understand him but finding comfort in talking anyway. "My mom always said I was a human furnace. This jacket's still warm." To his surprise, the animal sniffed at the jacket, then looked up at him with those wary eyes. There was something almost human in that gaze, something that made Tom's chest tighten with emotion. "I promise I'm one of the good guys," he whispered. 20 more minutes passed with Tom just sitting there, occasionally offering more water or food. The sun had risen higher in the sky, filtering through the leaves in dappled patterns. Eventually, the animal took a tentative step toward the jacket, then another. Tom held his breath as it carefully settled onto the fabric, still watching him cautiously. "There you go," he said softly. "That's better than the cold ground, isn't it?" Now came the tricky part. Tom knew he needed to wrap the jacket around the animal to carry it out of here, but he worried about scaring it or, worse, hurting its injured leg. He inched closer, speaking in a low, soothing voice the entire time. "I'm just going to help you, okay? We need to get you somewhere warm, somewhere safe." The animal tensed as Tom's hands reached for the edges of the jacket, but it didn't try to run. With careful movements, he wrapped the jacket gently around the trembling body, creating a makeshift sling. The animal was surprisingly light, too light, and Tom could feel its ribs through the fabric. His heart sank realizing how hungry it must be. "You're just skin and bones, aren't you? Don't worry, we'll fix that." Standing up with his precious bundle, Tom felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. His hiking plans were forgotten. Getting this animal to safety was all that mattered now. He knew the trek back would be long, at least 3 miles through increasingly rough terrain. "All right, buddy, we've got a journey ahead of us. I hope you don't mind if I talk your ear off. My girlfriend says I do that when I'm nervous." The first mile wasn't too bad. The animal remained still in his arms, occasionally making small whimpering sounds when Tom's footsteps jostled its injured leg. He tried to keep his pace steady and gentle, apologizing whenever a misstep caused discomfort. By the second mile, Tom's arms were beginning to ache. He shifted the bundle carefully, trying to redistribute the weight without disturbing his passenger. The forest seemed to grow thicker around them, fallen branches and uneven ground making each step a careful consideration. Almost halfway there, Tom panted, though he wasn't entirely sure that was true. "You're doing great, much better than my cat when I have to take him to the vet. He turns into a tornado of claws." The animal's eyes had closed, either from exhaustion or a growing trust in its rescuer. Tom felt a surge of protectiveness. Whatever this creature was, and he was increasingly certain it wasn't just an ordinary dog, it had chosen to trust him. He wouldn't let it down. By the time Tom finally reached his small cabin at the edge of the woods, his arms were shaking from exhaustion. The bundle in his arms had grown heavier with each passing mile, and his shoulders burned with the effort. "We made it, buddy," he said, fumbling with his keys. "Home sweet home." Inside, the cabin was warm thanks to the timer on his heating system. Tom had never been so grateful for modern conveniences. He gently placed his jacket-wrapped bundle on the bathroom floor, where any mess would be easy to clean up. "Let's get you cleaned up and have a better look at that leg," he said, unwrapping the jacket slowly. The animal blinked in the bright bathroom light, looking even more pitiful indoors than it had in the forest. Tom filled his sink with lukewarm water and found an old towel he wouldn't mind throwing away afterward. He'd never bathed a wild animal before, but he figured the principles couldn't be that different from washing his neighbor's golden retriever. "This might feel weird, but I promise it'll help," Tom said, dipping the towel in water. The animal flinched at first touch but seemed too tired to put up much resistance. Tom worked carefully, talking the whole time in that same gentle voice that had earned the creature's trust in the forest. As the mud and grime washed away, patches of beautiful fur began to appear. "You're quite handsome under all this dirt, aren't you?" Tom worked methodically, cleaning one section at a time. The water in the sink turned a murky brown, and he drained and refilled it twice. Gradually, the true appearance of the animal emerged, and that's when Tom's hand slowed, his brow furrowing in confusion. Something wasn't right. The shape of the animal's face, now clean, didn't look like any dog breed Tom recognized. The ears were larger, more pointed. The snout was longer and narrower than he expected. And the eyes, those eyes that had seemed so expressive in the forest, were a striking amber color that seemed to glow in the bathroom light. "What are you?" Tom whispered, more to himself than to the animal. He grabbed his phone from his pocket and quickly searched wild canines northeast. Pictures flooded his screen: foxes, coyotes, wolves, but none quite matched what he was seeing. Then he typed coyote-wolf hybrid and felt a jolt of recognition as similar faces appeared on his screen. "No way," he breathed, looking back at the animal. "You're a coy wolf." Tom had read about these animals in a nature magazine. They were increasingly common in the Northeast, a hybrid species that combined the adaptability of coyotes with the strength and size of wolves. But they were notoriously shy around humans, rarely seen, let alone handled. The animal, the coy wolf, looked back at him with those intelligent eyes, as if confirming his discovery. "But that doesn't make sense," Tom said, scratching his head. "Why would you let me help you? Your kind usually runs from people like their lives depend on it." He continued cleaning, now with even greater care. As he wiped mud from the creature's injured leg, he noticed something else strange. The leg didn't appear to be broken in the way he'd expected. Instead, it was bent at an unnatural angle, and there was what looked like crude stitching around a poorly healed wound. "This isn't a normal injury," Tom muttered, leaning closer to examine it. "Someone did this to you." The realization sent a chill down his spine. This wasn't a wild animal that had been hurt in an accident. Someone had handled this coy wolf before him, and from the look of that leg, they hadn't been gentle about it. Tom sat back on his heels, mind racing. What should he do now? He wasn't a vet, and he certainly wasn't a wildlife expert. But he couldn't just release this animal back into the wild with that leg. And taking it to the local animal shelter seemed wrong too. They wouldn't know what to do with a coy wolf. The animal had finished the bowl of water Tom had set down and was now watching him intently, as if waiting to see what would happen next. Despite everything, Tom couldn't help but smile at the creature's resilience. "Well, friend," he said, reaching out slowly to stroke the now clean fur on the coy wolf's head, "I think we've both gotten ourselves into something bigger than we expected this morning." Tom spent the night on his couch, keeping a watchful eye on the coy wolf, who was now resting on a pile of old blankets in the corner of his living room. He'd made a makeshift bed, offered some cooked chicken from his fridge, and even played soft music to keep the animal calm. By morning, he knew he needed professional help. "I've got to call someone who knows about these things," he told the coy wolf, who watched him with those intelligent amber eyes. "No offense, but you're way out of my league." After a quick search online, Tom found a wildlife rehabilitation center about 40 miles away. The website mentioned a Dr. Lisa Chen who specialized in wild canids. Perfect. Tom's fingers hovered over his phone for a moment before dialing. What if they just took the animal away and he never found out what happened? He'd grown attached to the coy wolf overnight, feeling responsible for its well-being. With a deep breath, he made the call. "Hello, my name's Tom," he said when someone answered. "I found what I think is a coy wolf in the woods yesterday. It's hurt, and I'm pretty sure someone did something to it. I don't know what to do." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "You have a coy wolf in your possession?" a woman's voice asked, sounding both concerned and intrigued. "And you're saying it appears to have been handled by humans before?" "Yes, ma'am," Tom replied. "Its lay has some kind of crude stitching on it, like someone tried to fix it but didn't really know what they were doing." The woman introduced herself as Dr. Chen and promised to come right away. Tom gave her his address, then sat down on the floor near the coy wolf, not too close to frighten it. "Help is coming," he said softly. "She knows a lot more about animals like you than I do." The coy wolf's ears twitched at the sound of his voice, and Tom could have sworn it understood him. 3 hours later, a small truck with Wildlife Rehabilitation Center painted on the side pulled up outside Tom's cabin. A woman in her 40s with practical clothes and a kind face stepped out, carrying what looked like a veterinary bag. "You must be Tom," she said with a smile that crinkled the corners of her eyes. "I'm Dr. Chen. Thanks for calling us." Tom led her inside, explaining how he'd found the animal and brought it home. Dr. Chen listened attentively, nodding occasionally. "Most people would have just walked away," she said. "Wild animals can be unpredictable, especially when injured. You took quite a risk." Tom shrugged. "I couldn't just leave it there." When they reached the living room, Dr. Chen froze, her eyes fixed on the coy wolf. The animal had raised its head, alert but not aggressive. "Oh my," she whispered, crouching down slowly. "You were right. That's definitely a coy wolf, a young female, I'd say, probably less than a year old." She opened her bag and pulled out some supplies. "I'll need to sedate her to properly examine that leg. Would you mind helping me?" With Tom's assistance, Dr. Chen carefully sedated the coy wolf and began her examination. Her hands moved with practiced precision over the animal's body, checking for injuries besides the obvious leg problem. "This is very strange," Dr. Chen muttered, focusing on the leg. "These aren't just crude stitches. Someone used actual surgical materials, the kind you wouldn't find in a standard first aid kit." She looked up at Tom, her expression troubled. "And look at this," she said, parting the fur on the coy wolf's neck to reveal a small bald patch. "There's evidence of a collar having been worn. This animal has been in captivity, illegal captivity, since keeping coy wolves as pets is against federal wildlife regulations." Tom felt his stomach twist. So someone kept her, tried to fix her broken leg, and then just dumped her in the woods. Who would do something like that? Dr. Chen's face darkened. Someone who realized they were about to get caught, most likely. "We've been getting reports of illegal wildlife trafficking in this region, but we haven't been able to pin anything down." She sat back on her heels, thinking. This animal might be evidence of something bigger, a breeding operation, perhaps. People pay a lot of money for exotic pets, even dangerous ones. The coy wolf's chest rose and fell steadily under the effects of the sedation. She looked peaceful now, her pain temporarily forgotten. What happens to her now? Tom asked, feeling strangely protective of this wild creature he'd known for less than a day. Dr. Chen looked at him thoughtfully. First, we need to properly treat that leg. Then we need to find out where she came from, and if there are others. The next few days passed in a blur for Tom. After Dr. Chen took the koi wolf to her rehabilitation center for proper medical care, Tom found himself unable to stop thinking about the animal and what might have happened to her. He'd check his phone constantly for updates from Dr. Chen, who had promised to keep him informed. She's doing well, Dr. Chen told him during one call. We've properly set her leg and she's eating better. But I'm still troubled by her background. We need to find out where she came from. Tom couldn't agree more. He'd spent hours online reading about wildlife trafficking and illegal exotic pet operations. The more he learned, the angrier he became. People buying and selling wild animals like they were toys, keeping them in horrible conditions, all for profit or status. I want to help, Tom told Dr. Chen. What can I do? They decided to start by spreading the word. Tom wasn't big on social media, but he knew its power. With Dr. Chen's guidance, he created a post with photos of the koi wolf, now nicknamed Luna for the moon-like markings around her eyes. He carefully described where he'd found her and asked if anyone had information about suspicious activity in the area. Don't mention that we suspect illegal breeding, Dr. Chen warned. We don't want to tip anyone off. Just say you found an injured animal with signs of previous human contact. Tom posted the photos and information on local community pages and outdoor hiking groups. Then he waited. For 2 days, nothing happened. A few people commented with well wishes for Luna's recovery, but no real leads emerged. Tom was beginning to lose hope when a private message appeared in his inbox from someone named Beth. I recognize that animal, her message read. I've seen others like it. Can we talk? Not online. Tom's heart raced as he read the message. He called Dr. Chen immediately, and they agreed to meet Beth together at a local coffee shop, public enough to be safe, private enough to talk. The next morning, Tom arrived early and chose a corner table. Dr. Chen joined him a few minutes later, looking both professional and approachable in her casual clothes. When Beth walked in, Tom was surprised to see a woman in her 60s with gray hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and eyes that spoke of someone who didn't scare easily. Thank you for meeting us, Dr. Chen said after introductions were made and coffee ordered. Beth glanced around before speaking. I live about 10 miles from where you found that animal, she explained in a low voice. For the past year, I've been hearing strange noises at night from the property next door. It changed owners last spring. A man named Ray Davis bought it. Keeps to himself, doesn't talk to neighbors. Tom leaned forward. What kind of noises? Animal sounds. Not normal ones like dogs barking or farm animals. These were different. Yipping, howling, but not quite like coyotes or wolves. Something in between. She sipped her coffee. At first I thought maybe he was just letting his dogs run loose. But then I started seeing strange things when I'd walk along our shared property line. What things? Dr. Chen asked, her voice carefully neutral. Cages, Beth said simply. Big ones, behind his barn. And once I saw him loading what looked like animal crates into a truck in the middle of the night. When I waved hello the next day, he acted real nervous, told me to stay off his property. Tom and Dr. Chen exchanged glances. This sounded promising and disturbing. About 3 weeks ago, Beth continued, there was some kind of commotion over there. Vehicles coming and going at odd hours. Then silence. No more animal sounds at night. 3 weeks ago would coincide with when Luna might have been abandoned, Dr. Chen mused. Beth nodded. When I saw your post with those pictures, I knew it had to be connected. That animal looks exactly like what I glimpsed in one of those cages. Did you ever report any of this? Tom asked. Beth's face fell. Once. Called Animal Control. They said they'd look into it, but nothing ever came of it. Davis must have hidden everything before they arrived. Dr. Chen pulled out her phone and showed Beth a few more photos of Luna. Are you certain this is similar to what you saw? Beth studied the images carefully before nodding firmly. No doubt about it. He had at least 3 or 4 animals that looked just like this one. As they left the coffee shop an hour later, Tom felt a mix of emotions. anger at this man Davis, concern for other animals that might still be suffering, and a glimmer of hope that they were getting closer to the truth. "What now?" he asked Dr. Chen as they stood in the parking lot. "Now," she said with determination in her voice, "we take this information to people who can actually do something about it. I have contacts in wildlife enforcement. With Beth's testimony and Luna as evidence, we might finally have enough to get a proper investigation going." Tom sat nervously in his truck, parked a safe distance from Ray Davis' property. It was just past dawn, and a light fog hung over the fields. Next to him, Dr. Chen checked her watch for the third time in 5 minutes. "They said 6:30, she murmured. "Should be any minute now." 3 days had passed since their meeting with Beth. Dr. Chen's contacts in wildlife enforcement had taken their information seriously enough to get a search warrant for Davis' property. Now they were waiting to see if all their efforts would pay off. What if he moved everything? Tom asked, voicing the fear that had kept him awake most of the night. What if there's nothing left to find? Dr. Chen gave him a reassuring smile. The authorities have been watching the property since I reported it. No trucks or large vehicles have gone in or out. If there are animals there, they're still there. As if on cue, 3 unmarked SUVs and a large animal control van turned onto the long driveway leading to Davis's house. Tom's heart pounded as he watched them disappear down the road. "Now we wait," Dr. Chen said, settling back in her seat. The waiting was torture. Tom couldn't see what was happening from their position, and Dr. Chen had been clear that they needed to stay back and let the professionals do their job. An hour crawled by, then another. Tom paced outside the truck, then climbed back in, then paced some more. Finally, Dr. Chen's phone rang. Her face gave nothing away as she listened, but when she hung up, she was smiling. "They'd found them," she said. 4 more koi wolves, all showing signs of poor care. And evidence of breeding operations, records, special food, medication. They've arrested Davis. Tom felt a rush of emotions, relief, anger, satisfaction. What about the animals? "They'll be brought to our center for evaluation and treatment. The officer said they're in rough shape, but alive." She started the truck. "They've asked me to come help with the transport. Want to come along?" Tom didn't need to be asked twice. When they arrived at the property, the scene was controlled chaos. Wildlife officers in uniforms moved purposefully between buildings. The animal control van was parked next to a large barn that had clearly been converted into some kind of makeshift breeding facility. One of the officers, a tall woman with a no-nonsense demeanor, approached them. "Dr. Chen, we could use your expertise. These animals are stressed and difficult to handle." Inside the barn, Tom's stomach turned. 4 large cages lined one wall, each containing a koi wolf similar to Luna. Unlike her, these animals looked terrified of humans, pressing themselves against the backs of their cages and baring their teeth when anyone came near. "Completely wild," Dr. Chen muttered. "He didn't socialize these ones the way Luna was. Makes me think she might have been part of an earlier group, maybe one he was trying to domesticate." The conditions were appalling. The cages were far too small, the floors covered in waste. A crude ventilation system did little to clear the air of the sharp smell of ammonia. On a table nearby, officers were cataloging evidence, medications, breeding records, and what looked like communications with potential buyers. He was selling them as exotic pets, one officer explained when Tom asked, charging thousands of dollars each. But when we started investigating reports of illegal wildlife trading in the area, he must have panicked. Looks like he was planning to move the operation, but hadn't figured out what to do with these animals yet. It took hours to safely sedate and transport all 4 koi wolves. By the time the last carrier was loaded into the van, the sun was setting. Tom watched as Davis was led to a police car in handcuffs, the man's face a mask of anger. "He'll face federal charges," the officer told them. "Wildlife trafficking across state lines is serious business. We found evidence he was shipping these animals as far away as Texas and Florida." Back at the rehabilitation center, Tom helped Dr. Chen and her team set up temporary housing for the new arrivals. Luna, who had been recovering in a large enclosure in the back of the facility, perked up her ears at the sounds of her kind nearby. "She knows they're here," Tom said, watching her curious reaction. Dr. Chen nodded. "These animals are highly social. Having others of her kind nearby might actually help her recovery. As they worked into the night, setting up proper food, water, and bedding for the rescued animals, Tom found himself thinking about how much his life had changed in just a week. From a simple morning hike to being part of a wildlife trafficking bust, it seemed unreal. "You know," Dr. Chen said as they took a break, sipping coffee from paper cups, "we couldn't have done this without you. If you hadn't stopped to help Luna that day in the woods, we might never have found these others." Tom watched through the window as a veterinarian checked on the sedated koi wolves, their wild beauty still evident despite their poor condition. One of them had a coat pattern remarkably similar to Luna's. "Maybe a sibling," Dr. Chen suggested, following his gaze. Tom felt a strange sense of completion, like pieces of a puzzle fitting together. But there was still one question nagging at him. "What happens to them now?" he asked. "Can they ever go back to the wild?" 6 months had passed since that fateful morning in the woods. The leaves that had crunched under Tom's hiking boots that day were long gone, replaced by the fresh green buds of spring. Tom stood at the edge of the Wildlife Center's largest outdoor enclosure, watching Luna trot confidently across the ground, her once injured leg showing barely a hint of a limp. "She's doing great," Dr. Chen said, coming to stand beside him. "Better than I ever expected, honestly." Tom smiled. Luna looked like a different animal now, healthy, strong, with a gleaming coat that caught the sunlight. The other rescued koi wolves were visible in the background, still more wary of humans than Luna, but gradually improving. "What about the others?" Tom asked, nodding toward the small pack. "Making progress. They'll never be as comfortable with people as Luna is, but that's probably for the best." Dr. Chen made some notes on her clipboard. The youngest two might eventually be candidates for release in a protected area, far from human settlements. The older ones, including Luna, will stay here. That had been the hardest reality to accept. Luna would never return to the wild. Her early handling by humans and her comfort around people made her unsuitable for release. She didn't have the fear of humans that would keep her safe in the wild. "I've been thinking," Dr. Chen said, turning to face Tom. "Luna has a story that needs to be told. People around here don't know much about koi wolves. Most think they're just a nuisance, or they confuse them with coyotes." "What are you suggesting?" Tom asked. "An education program, using Luna as an ambassador animal. Teaching people about koi wolves, their role in the ecosystem, and the dangers of the exotic pet trade." She smiled at his surprised expression, and I could use some help running it. Tom hadn't expected that. After the rescue operation, he continued volunteering at the center, spending most of his free time helping with the koi wolves' care. He'd grown particularly attached to Luna, who seemed to recognize him from that first day and would always approach the fence when he arrived. "Me? I don't know anything about wildlife education," he protested. "You know more than you think," Dr. Chen countered. "And you have something special. You can tell this story firsthand. You found Luna. You were part of bringing down Davis's operation. People connect with personal stories." 2 weeks later, Tom found himself standing nervously in front of 34th graders at the local elementary school. Luna, secured on a special harness, sat calmly at Dr. Chen's feet nearby. "Who can tell me what kind of animal this is?" Dr. Chen asked the children. "A wolf? A dog? A coyote?" The guesses flew from excited kids, their eyes wide with wonder. "This is Luna," Tom said, stepping forward. "And she's something special called a koi wolf. She's part coyote and part wolf, and she has quite a story to tell." As Tom recounted a child-friendly version of finding Luna in the woods, he watched the children's faces light up with interest and concern. They gasped at the right moments, cheered when he mentioned the rescue of the other animals, and asked dozens of questions afterward. "Can we pet her?" one little girl asked. Dr. Chen shook her head gently. "Luna isn't a pet. That's one of the most important lessons we want to share with you today. Wild animals, even ones that look a little like our dogs at home, need to stay wild. They belong in nature, not in our houses." Over the following months, Tom and Dr. Chen took their program to schools, community centers, and nature clubs throughout the region. Luna, always calm and dignified, became something of a local celebrity. Children would point excitedly when they spotted the Wildlife Center's van in town. The case against Ray Davis made headlines too. He was sentenced to 5 years in federal prison for wildlife trafficking and animal cruelty. More importantly, his case led to increased scrutiny of exotic pet dealers nationwide. One sunny afternoon, almost a year after finding Luna, Tom sat on a bench outside the wildlife center, taking a break between tour groups. Luna lay in the grass nearby, soaking up the warmth. She'd been joined by one of the other female coy wolves, the one Tom suspected might be her sister. The two animals had become inseparable over time. Dr. Chen emerged from her office, waving a letter. "Good news. The grant came through. We're getting funding for the new coy wolf habitat." Tom felt a surge of pride. The expanded habitat had been his idea, a larger, more naturalistic space for the permanent residents, with better viewing areas for educational programs. "You know," Dr. Chen said, sitting next to him on the bench, "when you first called me about finding a strange dog in the woods, I never imagined we'd end up here." Tom watched Luna stretch lazily in the sun. "Me neither. I was just a guy who liked hiking in the woods on weekends." "And now?" He smiled. "Now I'm a guy who still likes hiking in the woods, but who also knows a whole lot about coy wolves, wildlife trafficking, and how one small decision can change everything." Luna raised her head, those intelligent amber eyes finding his across the yard. She'd never be truly wild again, but she'd found her purpose and helped Tom find his too. "You know what I wonder sometimes," Tom said. "Who really rescued who that day in the woods?